Learning how to program will change your world. When you learn to program, you develop analytical and critical thinking skills that let you see the world differently. You are empowered. You can create applications that you have envisioned and maybe even build your own businesses around them. Learning how to program is democratic. The means are less and less expensive and more accessible every day, and it can level the economic playing field. And learning to program is satisfying. You will find new joy in challenging problems and in sharing your creations. But an unexpected benefit of learning how to program, one I think is still very important, is that it can lead us from wondering if and wondering how to just plain wonder, from curiosity to awe. Let's become students of programming for a moment and see how it adds wonder to our world. Consider language. The first program you'll learn to write is Hello World, a simple application that just prints the words Hello World to the screen. But the first lesson you learn is that programming languages are picky. What I mean is that a modern computer programming language looks like a weird blend of English and mathematics. Imagine a sentence like, if, open parenthesis, the letter A, less than symbol, the number 40, close parenthesis, open curly brackets, print, open parenthesis, double quotes, hello world, double quotes, close parenthesis, semicolon, close curly braces. That is what a programming language looks like. In order for a computer to understand a sentence like this, it must first be interpreted, and the rules for this are specific. Now, a new programmer might wonder if she can change something in that sentence. Can I get rid of those parentheses, or can I use single quotes instead of double quotes? Can I capitalize the word P instead of use a lowercase? And the answer is no. These are all mistakes. And at any point in its interpretation, yeah, right? And you make them all the time when you're a programmer, seriously. At any point in its interpretation, if there is even the slightest mistake in your code, it will not run. Programming languages are unforgiving. But human language is not. We misspell, and we misspeak, and we miscapitalize all the time. We use the wrong word. We use words with imprecise meanings. We forget commas and periods. We speak too quickly, and we pause in the wrong places. And yet, despite this, despite these mistakes, we still understand one another, and not just a little bit, but enough to share stories and to complete monumental undertakings together. Once you have been trained to program with so much care and so much specificity, you realize what a wonder it is that natural language works at all. Language, something we take for granted every day, becomes this amazing, unlikely ability that gives you chills when you think about it. And that's what I mean. That learning to program can lead you from wondering about the limits of a computer language to awe and fascination for natural language. Now, programmers are a curious bunch. As you become a programmer, you'll find that you might become a little bit stranger as well, a little bit quirky, and you may encounter the misconception that programmers have this uncanny ability to miraculously solve problems that no ordinary human being can even begin to penetrate, which is, of course, ridiculous. Most of the time, seriously, like 80% of the time, we are just following instructions. Program long enough, and you will develop a superhuman gratitude for good documentation. Don't know how that print function works? Look it up in the documentation. Wondering if you can use single quotes instead of double quotes? Documentation. Can't get your program to work at all and starting to freak out a little bit? Check the documentation. And if you don't, we have a saying for you. RTFM. Read the manual. Programmers really aren't so that bad. Once you have developed this appreciation for good documentation, you wonder why we don't write documentation for everything. And you realize that not everything can be documented, that so often what to do requires a context and personalization for which documentation is not appropriate. How do you make friends? How do you make friends? How do you make it through high school, and then college, and then professionally? How do you ask a girl out? That's not a rhetorical question. Seriously, how do you ask a girl? I really, really wish we had better documentation for that. Seriously. What do you do when your mother or father becomes terminally ill and suffers in and out of the hospital for months before finally passing away? There is no documentation for this. But despite how difficult and painful the world can be, how uncertain our path through it, we figure it out and we keep figuring it out, and that is inspiring and not a little wondrous. Life does not come with a manual, and we still do a hell of a job with it. Once you have developed this appreciation for documentation, you will also develop an appreciation for those times, and it is all the time, that we make our way in a world that just does not make sense. Or what about the natural world and humanity's place in it? Now follow me for a second. As your programming education continues, you learn that ultimately a computer program is a sequence of high and low voltages flowing through a circuit, and that this involves astonishing scales. The CPU, a microprocessor, the brains of a computer which responds to these high and low voltages, is composed of transistors. This may be a term that you've heard before. Now, a transistor is just like the light switch on your living room wall, except controlled by electricity instead of your finger. And they can be combined to perform mathematical computations. That's right, you can do math with the light switches on your wall. A modern microprocessor contains upwards of 5 billion transistors in a chip that is 25 millimeters by 25 millimeters squared. Imagine 5 billion light switches in just tiny, tiny space. It is an impressive engineering feat. Once you have been exposed to thinking in terms of numbers and sizes like this, your mind wanders to other domains where this kind of scale, both large and small, is common. Have you ever seen the Milky Way? At the right time of year, at the right time of night, and in a remote location, look up, wait a minute for your eyes to adjust, and you will see a band of stars that stretches all the way across the night sky from one horizon to the other, with a bright middle that is the center of the galaxy 27,000 light years away, each light year being 6 trillion miles. There are 300 billion stars in our galaxy. 300 billion! Our sun is just one of them. And how many galaxies are there in the universe? Another estimated 300 billion, which means that the total number of stars in the universe is a 1 followed by 23 zeros. You can't even really think of a number like that. Talk about scale. Not to mention the distances that are involved. It is genuinely inconceivable. It's incredible that anything exists at all, let alone hundreds of billions of stars each and hundreds of billions of galaxies, and that it would lead to this moment right now. And you realize, whatever you believe, whether you believe in God or don't know what to believe, that the universe, that existence with this just giant capital E is amazing, and that humanity is this almost imperceptible dust in the midst of it all that just must be meaningless. It is so insignificant and yet is so inexplicably full of meaning. What if learning how to program can teach you this? I think it can. Learning to program rouses our curiosity, and that changes our perception of the world. It shows us the amazing, incredible, wondrous things going on every day that we take for granted. It leads us from wondering if and wondering how, from wondering about transistors and documentation and parentheses and double quotes, to awe for humanity and for the wider world. But learning to program can also take that world away. What I mean is that when you learn to program, you think in specific ways, you understand the world in specific ways. And there is a risk that we close the world off to other kinds of understanding when we think like this. For example, a computer programmer is trained to solve problems. We live and breathe problem solving. And so, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, or probably a lot more than that, we are being given, looking for, and solving problems. Well, what do you get when you've got a person dealing with problems 40 to 60 hours a week? a tendency to problematize. Someone who sees the world as a problem, who understands the world more and more in terms of its inefficiencies and its ineffectiveness than for its beauty and for its idiosyncrasies. There is a risk that the kind of emphasis on problem solving that you see in programming will create people who cannot help but see the world and our place in it, and so much of what we do as individuals and as a society as a problem to be solved, and more as a problem to be solved with technology. And that is a narrow view of the world. We've seen that learning to program develops the ability to think with precision and with specificity. And further, that programming languages require this. To produce and then understand an operation in a program is to identify its canonical interpretation, its single correct one. The statement, if A is less than 40, print hello world, checks if A is less than 40, and if it is, prints hello world, and that is all it does, and that is all it will ever do, and to understand it in any other way is to understand it incorrectly. This is what I mean by precision and specificity. Singular interpretation, one way of understanding. All programming is like this. It is language, yes, but it is mathematical and logical in a way that natural languages are not. And this kind of thinking, this kind of clarity and assured understanding is seductive. There is a risk that once we have learned about the benefits of thinking in this way, and there are benefits, that we then hope or expect that all thinking and that all language and maybe even that all behavior and the world itself be so precise and so specific. But the world, our actions, thinking, and language are not like this. They are unambiguous at times. And I would argue that this can be productive. We are stardust from one star among billions and billions and billions of stars in trillions and trillions and trillions of miles of empty space. Does that make our existence meaningless? Or does that make it all the more meaningful? How can you even begin to understand the human condition, let alone resolve it, let alone provide that decisive interpretation of it? And yet so much of our endeavor as a species, as humanity, has been an attempt to solve this question. Art and science and literature and philosophy and religion, to answer the question of what it is to be human and what our place in the universe is. And we still do not have an answer. That is an open question. A story means one thing when you are a child and another when you are an adult, and it is intentionally left open to interpretation so that you may learn different lessons at different times in your life. And moral ambiguity speaks to those decisions that are almost impossible to make because there is no clear right or wrong at times, and we must be able to recognize this. Thinking and language could stand to be more precise, without a doubt, but it is not always appropriate. When we think like this, as we must when we learn to program, we risk closing ourselves off to those experiences where uncertainty is essential. But there is a more serious risk. The kinds of interactions that a programmer has with technology are interactions that all of us experience, and they are changing us, often without us realizing it, and in ways that are disquieting. When a programmer cannot solve a problem, has just been working on it for hours and just cannot figure it out, he can stop and walk away. He can't ignore it. Or more likely, he can persevere and through the sheer application of his intellect and will force a solution, hammer away on that problem until he figures it out. This way of doing things, this way of interacting with technology represents a wider relationship that all of us have with technology. When that DVD player isn't working, or Blu-ray player, or whatever it happens to be, you know what? You can just forget about it, maybe even replace it. Or you can literally bang on it until it starts working. I know we've all experienced this, right? But we do not just walk away from our friends when they need us, and we do not replace them, and we do not bang on others until they do what we want. Hopefully. Maybe when you're a little kid, right? Excuse me, we do not bang on others when they do not do what we want, right? I got to double check that. I was like, did I bang on somebody? No, I did not. We interact with technology differently than we interact with each other. I would characterize it as more lopsided, less reciprocal, more self-centered. We curse at our phones and our computers, but they do not curse back at us. Curse at a person and expect a response. We can turn off our devices when we do not want to use them anymore, but we cannot turn each other off, and we cannot turn the world off. We pour our hopes and our dreams into technology, seeking self-realization, meaning, and connection through it. We may even develop feelings for our iPhones. We talk to them, but they do not share their hopes and dreams with us. Technology does not feel for us, and it does not converse with us or listen to us. But when I share my aspirations with a friend, I hope she listens. And she, in turn, hopes I listen when she shares hers with me. Our emotions are reciprocated, and we have conversations with one another, not at each other. There is a risk that as we interact more and more with technology and with each other through technology, as a programmer certainly does, but as all of us do now that technology has become so ubiquitous, there is a risk that we begin to treat each other like we treat technology. I can ignore the status updates and notifications and SMSs and voice messages and emails from my friends and colleagues. When I am bored of the discussion at a meeting or of my professors rambling, excuse me, professors, I can pick up my iPhone and surreptitiously browse the internet, ignoring it. When I'm standing in line at the cafe, I can pull out my phone and play a game, ignoring those around me. And when I am on the morning commute, I can put on my headphones and let the world and everything in it melt away, turning off my surroundings insofar as we can. Technology makes it so easy to amplify ourselves and to disregard others. And when we do that, we lose a great deal of what is meaningful in the world. But technology is not only changing how we behave, it is changing us physically. And although the programmer may experience this more acutely than her peers, we all experience it, even if we do not realize it, although I would be willing to bet that I think you kind of see it. A few months ago, I decided to stop checking my iPhone so habitually. I made the conscious decision to resist the random but common impulse to reach for my phone and browse the internet or check my email. And what I discovered was alarming. I noticed it most when I was driving. When I drive, I take my iPhone out of my back pocket where it is uncomfortable and set it in the passenger seat. And I'd be driving down the highway at 70 miles an hour or stopped at a red light, and bip, out of nowhere, the thought enters my mind to check my phone, to reach for my phone, and instinctively I would reach for it. I have to stop myself from reaching for it. And this was hard. I realized I think about checking my phone more often than I think about sex. That cannot be normal. 6 years ago, I didn't even have a cell phone. Now I can't stop checking it. What happened? It started with the ringing. My phone rings, and I want to know who's trying to reach for me, so I grab for it. Or an email arrives, and ding, ooh, an email. Let's check my email, whatever else I happen to be doing at the time. And when I do, I experience a nice little reward in my brain, a brief moment of neurological pleasure. But before long, that external stimulus was no longer necessary. I'd hear my phone ring, or I'd feel it vibrate in my back pocket and go to check it only to see that no one was calling me. Yeah, right? You've experienced this. A phantom vibration, a phantom ringing. My brain made it up. And not too long after that, I was just checking my phone spontaneously anyway. In the end, my brain replaced the external stimulus to check my phone with an internal one. I was generating the impulse myself. Let me be clear what this means. My brain was physiologically altered so that it generated the impulse to check my phone instead of me. My iPhone changed my brain. It is Pavlovian, except the dog has the bell and can ring it any time he wants. But that's not really true. The bell is embedded inside the dog's brain and is ringing out of his control. We shape our technology without a doubt, but technology also shapes us. We adapt to it. And more often than not, we do not realize that this is happening or how it is changing us. And when technology changes us, it changes how we perceive and interact with the world. When you learn to program, you will change your world in amazing ways. You will discover wonder in the mundane. When you use technology, your world is already changing, whether you realize it or not, and in ways that are unsettling. Let us become more aware of how using technology, how thinking technologically can both add richness to the world and take some of its richness away. Thank you.